Now, if there's anything you haven't seen on this channel yet, it's a smartphone review. So, welcome! This video is it. Today, we're talking about the Motorola Edge 50 Ultra, a smartphone review, year and a half late to the party. Sup boys, welcome to 1000 words and cheers! Today's beverage of choice is Neumarkt, used to be the channel regular, used to be a 50-cent a bottle kind of beer, not anymore because prices has gone up. Still a pretty decent beer, I love me some Neumarkt, very hoppy, very bitter, honest to God Pilsner. Decidedly bitter, very manly. Cheers, fellows, and welcome to what is something I've actually really never done on this channel. And if you're asking what this has to do with the main theme of the channel, is the fact that this is going to be a review of a smartphone, sure enough, but from the viewpoint of a photographer. And mostly talk about the photography side of things, show you some pictures, tell you about a lot of the incredible things this phone camera does, and also touch upon some negatives and some drawbacks, things I really struggled to get accustomed to, but seem to be the norm nowadays. First of all, now the way I want to address answering the question of why even do a phone review on this channel in the first place is chronologically. Firstly, this is the gadget I dreamed about when I was a child. I was very much, and I mean 10 years old, 7 years old, really small child. I was really into robots and cyborgs and computers and gadgets and phasers. I was very much a Trekkie. I loved those Casio watches with a calculator. While I never owned one, I loved everything that was a gadget, that was a tiny computer that could fit in a pocket. So being able to so casually go out and buy what is an incredibly powerful miniature computer. I mean, this has an octa-core processor. This has 16 gigs of RAM. We'll get into the specs of it, but this is so much, way out there. Now, secondly, and perhaps more importantly, I own an even bigger debt of gratitude to smartphones because these machines are what got me into photography in the first place. I think it was 2010 when I first started playing with smartphone cameras and found myself honestly, truly fascinated by photography. I used to use those $15 clip-on macro lenses that you attach to your camera and used to take photos and video of ordinary things around me, magnified several times, and I would be amazed, fascinated with the fact that the phone in my pocket could see that. I was so enamored by the whole process of making images and video, so it was there and then that I started falling in love with photography. Even my love for YouTube and making videos, I think I can take it back to 2010 or thereabouts when I would record videos and do montages to music I liked of abstract stuff, blades of grass, textures, fabrics, insects, everything that I found interesting, everything and anything that looked nice under magnification was something I filmed, I took footage of, then I cut it up into, I think it was Vegas, Sony Vegas that I started editing in, then it was Premiere, but that is besides the point. So then everything is because of this. I'm a photographer now because I started taking pictures with a smartphone. On my way to and from work, or when I was just walking around the city, I used to take pictures of strangers with my phone. Before I even knew this was called street photography. Before I even knew street photography was a thing, I was doing it. Rather very much instinctively, intuitively, and as a way to record and document life around me, things that I find interesting, and consequently express myself artistically, because I have always had an artistic side and the need to express myself artistically. Perhaps someday I will make a video where I talk about the poetry I used to write, the theater plays I used to write, journaling. I did a lot of writing. I was a DJ at one time. I made computer electronic music for 15 years. I used to play at festivals. So I always had a creative itch I needed to scratch. And once I discovered the amazing capabilities of smartphones in regards to taking pictures and video, is where everything started for me. So that's reason number 2 why I want to do a phone review, because I owe the fact that I'm a photographer and YouTuber now to the fact that these things exist. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, is because this specifically, the Motorola Edge 50 Ultra is so underappreciated, flying so low under the radar while packing an enormous punch. It's not even funny. It's not nearly as popular as the iPhones and the Samsungs, and if we're talking about Android, more specifically, not even as popular as the Xiaomis or the Oppos or the Vivos or the OnePlus or the Sony Xperias, which sell like 3 units a year. But despite all that, this is a killer machine. Now, why now? Why year and a half late to the party? Because I learned it the hard way back in fall of 2023 when I purchased what was my first brand new off-the-shelf 2-year warranty smartphone in a long while. I used to only buy second-hand devices, and that served me really well. But it was October of 2023 when I came into a bit of money, so I could justify spending what was and still is a significant amount of money to me. I mean, spending $800, euros rather, that's even more, on a phone was unthinkable for me. I never did that. I used to usually gravitate around 200 to 300 euros, and that's where I felt comfortable. I got me the Motorola Edge 40 Pro, the 2023 Motorola flagship. This guy's... So yeah... This is incredible. I mean, it's not incredible, it's amazing. And I think it's so trivial to implement. I wonder why not all manufacturers use this. Shake to light up the torch. I can't tell you how many times I use this a day. It's so useful. I was talking about me buying the Motorola Edge 40 Pro, this guy's ancestor. While a pretty great phone, had the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, 12 gigs of RAM, 256 gigabytes of storage, pretty decent cameras. I think the cameras were its weakest point, but other than that, a curved screen, good battery, really great design, felt good in the hand, really great screen. I must stress that. Fantastic performance. It was rather lackluster with cameras and even more so with video. Now, that served me good enough until a couple of weeks ago when I got this. The lesson that I learned with the Moto Edge 40 Pro, while it itself being a fantastic device, was the fact that it's not worth it for me. I mean, if you're made of money, go ahead, buy 3 of those as soon as they're launched. But for me, it's not worth buying the current flagship. Now, this I got about a year and a half after it was launched. And while this was launched at 1,000 European rubles, that's 1,000. Sure enough, if you bought it at 1,000, you got a 200 voucher, so that basically made it 800. Still a whole lot of money. Now, I got this 2 weeks ago, about a year and a half after it was launched, for 520 European rubles. Yep, that's basically half the price. And it's not half as good as it was when it was launched. It's still just as good. Sure, there are phones that are better than this that have since been released, But this itself, this is going to be a meme very soon. Now, this itself at 500 buckaroos in mid 2025 is still just as much a capable device as it was for 1,000 year and a half ago. So the lesson that I learned is to buy the last year's flagship. Now, I've started appreciating and seeing the advantages of buying new, the comfort of knowing this is covered by manufacturer's 2-year warranty. I mean, you're on your own with second-hand devices off of Facebook Marketplace, but while they rarely ever break, is my experience. I used to daily drive second-hand devices for many years, and basically the only way I could break them is by dropping them, which I rarely ever did. So that's just to say that while sure enough, these basically don't ever break, it's when they do that you really appreciate that it's covered by a 2-year warranty. So I've started seeing the benefits of buying new. Now, let me go over the specs briefly, because while there are quite a lot of Snapdragon 8 Elite phones out there, this is still very much an impressive device, even now in mid-2025. And yeah, I'm gonna read because I can't be asked to remember all of this. While I do know most of these, some specifics I do want to be sure I get right, because they will turn out to be important. Snapdragon 8S Gen 3. Now, notice the S. It's not the 8 Gen 3. It's not even the 8 Gen 4, otherwise called 8 Elite. It's a toned-down version of the 8 Gen 3, a newer version, aiming to focus on optimization, battery life, while still being very powerful. And powerful it is. Impressive benchmark results I'm not going to bother you with, but what matters to me is the fact that this works great. I mean, I'm really a sucker for a great performing device. I like to get the most out of my money. So every time I make a purchase, I try to buy the most I can afford. So the 8S Gen 3 performs brilliantly. There have only been 2 or 3 occasions when I've seen stutters and interface lag, but for most intents and purposes, for most everyday use, and even for processing RAWs, because I've done some RAW processing on the phone, even for editing video, even for gaming, which I don't do much of, if any at all, the 8S Gen 3 is entirely serviceable, very much a respectable SoC. Launched with Android 14, supposed to get up to 3 major Android upgrades and 4 years of security updates. Now, this is already on Android 15 and has been since December of 2024, I think. Now, GPU-wise, this sports the rather modest Qualcomm Adreno 735, and while modest on paper, this performs well enough. Now, this is where things get really interesting. This comes with the European version, because there are several others that are differently spec'd, but the European version, the one I have here, comes with 16 gigabytes of 4266 megahertz RAM. That's 16 gigabytes. I mean, a lot of people don't have 16 gigabytes of RAM on their computers. There's 16 gigabytes of RAM here. Plenty for keeping a lot of apps in memory, plenty for day-to-day use. And speaking of storage, this has a whopping terabyte of storage. That's 1,000 gigabytes. That's a lot. That's really a tremendous amount of storage. Now, I usually find 128 barely sufficient these days. 256, I think, is very serviceable. 512 is just plenty in my book. But 1,000? A terabyte? That's just basically flaunting. That's flexing right there. Happy to have it. Doubt I'll ever fill it. But that just goes to show this is a very well-spec device. Now, things get really interesting. A 6.67-inch POLED. Sure, it's not an LTPO, but this one has a resolution of 1220 by 2712 pixels. It's 10-bit, no complaints there. 100% DCI-P3, which translates to very good color calibration. 144 Hertz. Now, as far as I'm concerned, 90 is the minimum I'll take these days. But 144 Hertz is just bragging rights. But I keep it on its smart setting, which I think automatically adjusts the screen and it maxes out at 120 Hertz. But that's still very much a fluid screen, blended and HDR10 plus capable, while not able to deliver any Dolby Vision in Netflix, which is a bummer. Available in YouTube, so this device certainly supports it. There's HDR video on YouTube, no HDR video on Netflix. Now, I don't watch movies. I rarely do. Very rarely do I catch up on some Vikings, Valhalla, or some other stuff that I'm watching while I'm having breakfast at work. Point is, I would want this to have it rather than not. Do I mind? It doesn't? A little. But I forget about it quickly because otherwise the screen is Pantone validated. This, the 50 Ultra and the 50 Pro, they share the same screen, and these are the only smartphones in the world. Let me say that again. These are the only smartphones in the world that have a Pantone validated screen, both for color accuracy and skin tone rendition. So rest assured, anything and everything displayed on the screen is going to be, let's call it picture perfect, let's call it accurate and natural. And I do have to say, this turns out to be really great. The auto white balance when taking photos is always perfect, which is not something I was ever able to say for any of the other phones I used to use. While these days, computational photography has gotten pretty damn good, a lot of phones, even cameras, struggle with auto white balance. Sure enough, that issue is mitigated once you start shooting RAW and process your images, but straight out of the camera, or should I say straight out of the phone, the images coming out are always spot on, perfectly natural, just like you see them with your eyes. So the screen is great, it's sharp, it's vivid, it's really beautifully and pleasantly saturated. I even love the fact that it's curved around the edges. I mean, I know this has fallen out of favor and people seem to favor the very flat screens. While I do see the advantages of a flat screen, I think I prefer a curved edge screen this tiny bit more. The way my finger slides over the edges of the screen when I'm navigating the interface. And I do use the gesture navigation rather than the back, the home, and the menu, the, what is that? The display all apps button. I've always used the gesture navigation in Android for, I don't know, since many years ago. And a curved edge screen is great for that. Now, as far as the battery goes, the Moto Edge 50 Ultra is rather modestly endowed. The 4500 mAh lithium polymer battery is, I think we can already call it last gen. Why do I say that? What do I mean by that? A lot of phones these days come with silicon carbon batteries that are 5000, 6000, 7000 mAh as far as capacity goes. So when you're talking about 4500, that's basically low tier. That's really rather modest. However, that's only on paper, because in actual use, in practice, the processor, the Snapdragon 8S Gen 3, coupled with the software optimizations Motorola have done, ensure an impressive battery performance. Let me just go ahead and check, because yeah, I'm going to do this real time, real fast, and show you, or rather tell you, the screen on times 4 hours and 9 minutes, 2 hours, 1 hour, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, 28 minutes. And this is coming home with 40, 30, 60% battery left. So I think this can do 7 hours, 8 hours of screen on time without breaking a sweat. It's when I come home that I basically don't use this device anymore, just for some calls, some Facebook browsing, but I use it most when I'm away from home. And I come home with 40% left, sometimes 60, sometimes 30, but I never worry about battery. So in actual practice, while on paper 4500 sounds like a little, in actual practice it's a lotl. I mean, let's talk about the included, which is a rarity by today's standards, the included charging brick, which is 125 watt capable. That thing can charge my laptop, which is a 17-inch humongous machine. It's so rare these days to even have a charger, let alone a 125 watt charger with a USB-C to USB-C cable. I mean, it seems like there's just so much that they wanted to give you so that they can justify the Ultra. Because while on paper this seems like not an Ultra, there's the, rather, let's call it as Gen modest processor, which is anything but in actual use. There's the modestly sized battery. There's very little AI to speak of, and while I don't necessarily need, enjoy, or want much of that, that sells. Circle to search, magic, erase, all that sells. And while all of that is present here, this device is capable of all of that. It's not touted like the end-all be-all. Still, feature-wise, with just a very few exceptions, which in practice are completely negated, this device is absolutely amazing. Let me see what else is there. USB ports are the Type-C 3.1 Gen 2 variety, which is yet again something that not everybody offers. The 14T Pro by Xiaomi is its closest competitor, price-wise, spec-wise. And that features a USB-C 2.0 port. I mean, that's silly. Talking about the cameras, things get really, really interesting. And it only further strengthens and justifies the Ultra moniker. Now, spec-wise, very quickly, the main camera is a 50 megapixel OmniVision OV50H pure cell sensor, 1/1.3 inches in size, f1.6 featuring face detect autofocus, laser autofocus, optical image stabilization. The ultra-wide is the Samsung S5 KJN1, 50 megapixel once again, 1/2.76 of an inch, f2.0 with autofocus, which is surprising because not a lot of phones offer ultra-wides with autofocus. A lot of phones really cheap out on their ultra-wides. They just throw it in there so they can tick a box. But this phone's ultra-wide is, while not as good as the main camera, is really good. The periscope telephoto is impressive in its own right. Yet again, an OmniVision made OV64B sensor, half an inch in size, 1/2, with an f2.4 and 3 times optical zoom, featuring face detect autofocus and optical image stabilization. The telephoto on this camera, while not impressive by some standards, personally, I don't think you're meant to do wildlife photography with the phone. Personally, I don't think after you've shot 3 images of the moon, you care for any of that anymore. In how many more ways can you photograph a moon so that it remains interesting? The moon is the moon. I mean, if you're not doing stacking with long telephoto lenses and proper cameras, your efforts are wasted on shooting the moon. Let's not even go into the whole shenanigans of phones using AI to fill in some of the blanks and basically almost do image generation. As far as I'm concerned, the main use of a telephoto camera on the smartphone is to take portrait pictures. And sure enough, this is great for head and shoulders type portraits. This is something that this phone does really well. Moving on to the selfie camera, which I wouldn't even have mentioned were it not for the fact that it features the same sensor as the ultra-wide on the back here. Usually, a lot of phones really cheap out on selfie cameras. Even some flagships from Xiaomi offer pretty lackluster experiences in terms of selfie shooting. This one uses the same 50 megapixel Samsung SKJN1 with an f1.9 aperture and autofocus. I think I can count the phones that offer autofocus selfie cams on the fingers on my hand. So you see, even spec-wise, the cameras on this phone are impressive. Video-wise, we'll get to that soon, but let's talk about some photos. Short story, they're amazing. For a phone, really natural, color accurate, lively, bright and vivid, sharp enough, but not over-sharpened, fantastic dynamic range, good definition, plenty of contrast, and I love the fact that in comparison to some phones out there like the Google Pixel, which, and some iPhones, should I say a lot of iPhones, all of iPhones, tends to brighten up the shadows so much that you get an image that's flat and looking like a poor man's HDR something from 2000. This phone will let shadows go dark at times, and I like that. Shadows should be dark. There shouldn't be much light in shadows. Sure, there should be some amount of detail, but I often intentionally, when I process my pictures from my Fuji, or all other cameras, I used to always, or a lot of times I should say, to be more precise, I often used to even crush my shadows a bit. So I prefer shadows that are dark. As far as highlights go, this does a fantastic job at HDR. Now, a lot of phones will make pictures that really look artificial and very processed. And this one manages to make HDR photos that are really impressive. Sure, it does a lot of computational photography behind the scenes, and this is where I'm going to complain about the thing that I dislike most, the fact that it does too much, but more often than not, it does a good job at making images that look bright and vivid. It doesn't overly pull back the highlights in order to get an image that's flat and lifeless, but it does so just enough so there's detail in a cloudy sky. Very good colors, true to life, sufficiently saturated, well behaved. I wouldn't say toned down because they're very bright, vivid, and playful, but they're not over the top. They're not nuclear. They're not yelling at you. They're not in your face. Images coming out of the main camera are really superb. And I'm mostly going to be talking about images from the main camera because it's the star of the show. Sure, the ultra-wide is great. I tend to not use it that much because the main camera is so good and I rarely need so wide of a shot that I have to use the ultra-wide. But the fact that I do love about it is that white balance seems to stay consistent between switching cameras, which is not something I can say for a lot of phones out there. I love the images coming out of this phone so much that I've basically neglected my everyday carry for the entirety of the past 2 weeks. I used to shoot my Fujifilm X-M5 around the house to take photos of my daughter while she's playing and being awesome like she is. So I've done most, if not all of that with the phone, and I've gotten some really great pictures, so much so that I almost started feeling a little guilty about not using my main cam, like I'm doing a disservice to the images, but then when I looked at those images, they came out great. Even the telephoto is great for portraits, really nice, crisp and clean. It even has somewhat of a softness. It's not an unsharp lens. It's sharp, but it has a very pleasing gentleness to it that makes for really pleasant portraits. And I love the telephoto camera. Now, in regards to portraits, as far as I'm concerned, the telephoto camera is preferable. It's much better than anything else. It makes for really pretty images, quite natural with a very soft, gentle sharpness to them, so there's really no contest in my book. However, there's also the option to use the main camera to make those simulated bokeh-licious shots, and while it does a pretty good job, if I'm honest, better than most phones out there, certainly better than all the other phones I've tried, the edge detection is pretty great. Sometimes it will make some mistakes, but for most intents and purposes, the edge detection is great. The simulated bokeh looks pretty natural. Sure, it doesn't look as good as the real deal. I do often use the main camera in portrait mode because pictures coming out of that are decent enough, definitely serviceable, not much to complain about. Now, let's talk about some of the shortcomings. Let's talk about where this phone doesn't do as good of a job. And it's basically down to being a bit heavy-handed in processing, a bit too eager to please, a bit too AI-driven. Now, I would love for it to have a tick somewhere there that would allow me to turn off AI altogether. Sadly, it doesn't. There is a natural versus auto-enhance option, and I leave it on natural, but that still makes it so that the phone basically always post-processes the images for me. And if you know me, you know that I like my images to be as close to natural as possible. Now, I had to get accustomed with the one thing that I dislike the most about this phone's camera. And it's not to do with quality, because images come out looking fantastic 99.99% of the time. What I dislike about this phone's camera is the fact that the way it works is you press the screen to take an image and it does something in the back. There's pixel binning, there's stacking multiple images because it does take multiple pictures to get the sky right, it does a lot of computational photography in the back to deliver what is, in all honesty, a fantastic image. But it does so about a second later. Sometimes that means missing the shot. I remember my daughter playing with some sunglasses. She was all cool about it, playing with them, putting them on and taking them off. And I tried to capture her with her eyeglasses on, and I thought I did. There was this very brief period of time where she had the eyeglasses on. Now, if you have kids, you know, they're very fast, they're very unpredictable. So while I was fully expecting to get a picture with her with the eyeglasses on, I pressed the shutter button at the exact time I should have when her eyeglasses were on, but then I opened up the gallery only to see for a split second the right image with her having the eyeglasses on, but the next split second after that, I got the final image and the eyeglasses had fallen off. And that happened more than once. That has happened a lot of times. So I guess Motorola knows about this. And while watching reviews online, I have seen this is something a lot of phones do these days. And it's not for lack of power, because the 8S Gen 3 is powerful, a powerful processor. It's because it's just the way things are. Phones do a lot of post-processing in the back. Motorola does know about this, and they do offer a fast action shot which saves the image the second you press the shutter button. And that does tend to mitigate this issue. While I haven't thoroughly tested that, I think it's not as good of a picture as that without fast action mode on. And it's a shame. It's a shame because otherwise images are fantastic, but they take a split second to process. And that split second often means the difference between your shot and not what you wanted to capture in the first place. That's the first thing I dislike about this phone, and it's the main thing. It's why, while it does take fantastic images, and I sound like a broken record by now, it's just going to be a very good camera that I end up using less and less because this thing, the XM5 or any other dedicated camera, will take the image the second you press the shutter, as expected. Now, furthermore, there seems to be a bit too much processing in some situations. Like this image. Of course, beautiful image. When you zoom into the upper right corner and you look at it, you start to see some patterns. There's, I think it's pixel binning that's showing up here. There's obvious quadrants, like little squares in the clouds here. And while this hasn't happened, or maybe I haven't seen it happen since it's the single image where this behavior seems to have manifested, it does seem like something to do with too much of a heavy-handed approach to post-processing. Sure, mitigated yet again by using the raw capture, which, if we're talking about, is absolutely amazing. I've seen dedicated photo cameras. I've seen cameras that do worse than this phone does if we're talking about raw capture. And while not the purpose, I mean, sure enough, if I was somewhere on a hill and witnessing the greatest sunset I've ever seen and being without any of my cameras, I will shoot in RAW only to have the opportunity or the possibility to process the image later. The Moto Edge 50 Ultra's camera offers a Pro Photo mode that will allow you to shoot both JPEGs and RAW. Now, this is, at least to my understanding, I certainly haven't found any other way other than this to completely avoid using any AI, any behind-the-scenes post-processing. Shooting RAW means you have the opportunity to post-process. The DNGs coming out of this phone are pretty incredible. I think it rivals a lot of, and even surpasses, to be frank, a lot of compact cameras out there, and I'm not even talking about the digicams of yesteryear. I'm talking of current generation RX100s and the Canons and all those point-and-shoot cameras, the 1-inchers. The DNGs are outstanding. Frankly, the Latitude is impressive. It offers a lot of leeway in pushing and pulling and lifting shadows and recovering highlights. Frankly, incredible. Furthermore, shooting in Pro Photo mode alongside with the DNG file, you will also produce a JPEG file that is completely free from any sort of AI shenanigans. If you're after accurate, true-to-life, natural scenes, but usually I just want this as a JPEG shooter, so I will basically always default to shooting JPEGs. Sometimes shooting JPEGs means artifacts like the ones I talked about earlier. Now, all that said, this remains a remarkable, a fantastic value proposition. Buy it a year and a half later for half the price. You get 16 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte of storage, frankly incredible cameras, beautiful screen, decent enough battery, excellent build and design. I didn't even mention the faux leather back. Well, I would have gone for a glass back, or better yet, still an aluminium metal back. Remember the HTC One days? Bring that back. The faux leather back does feel nice. I do wonder how well this will end up aging, but it does feel really nice. There are also fake wood. I mean, they call it real wood, but it's just a plastic with some wood grain texture on top of that. It's not real wood. Although they do call it real wood, there's also a very pink peach kind of color still with a leather back. But this, what they call forest gray, I think looks very spiffy, very elegant. I love the design. This is a very well-built phone, very slim, and I'm extremely happy to have a phone that's slightly slimmer than most. It's not as wide as a lot of phones out there. It's very usable with one hand. There's no finger gymnastics you need to do. And even the camera bump is really small. The way the back curves to meet the camera island here is... I love the design of this phone. It's beautiful. IP68 certified for dust and water ingress. No issue taking it to the pool or to the desert if that's your thing. But I do wear it inside a case, mostly because my line of work is dirty. I often find myself covered in printer toner, and I often go inside printers to look for stuck pieces of paper or anything that's broken. I sometimes drop this. So I do want to keep it in one piece. And while this does feature Corning's Gorilla Glass Victus, I do want to ensure it lasts as long as it can. So that's why I use a case, and this is a really nice case. That said, this is a beautiful device, very good value proposition, an incredible performer. Sure, it's not the S25 Ultra, it's not got the 8 Elite, it's just the last year's flagship, and that's perfectly fine with me. I recently compared the photos this makes with a friend's Samsung S23 Ultra. And let me just tell you, this absolutely puts that to shame. The Galaxy S23 Ultra has nothing on this guy. The Moto Edge 50 Ultra puts the S23 Ultra to shame. It wipes the floor with it in terms of zoom camera performance, main camera performance, overall image quality wise. The images this phone makes are much better. I didn't even mention the fact, and I should have, that the Moto Edge 50 Ultra has gotten a gold medal from DxOMark in 2024 in their camera ratings. And sure enough, my experience only further attests that. Now, the gist of things is the fact that this is an incredible value proposition. Frankly, I don't think there's any better deal to be had for $500. 16 gigs of RAM, a whopping terabyte of storage. These cameras, this screen, Pantone validated, 100% DCI-P3. Even the processor is just good, if not great. The battery, while modest on paper, is great in day-to-day life. I didn't even mention the speakers on this phone. While not the subject of this video, it should be mentioned. This offers incredible sound, dedicated speaker on the bottom, dedicated speaker on the top, because while a lot of phones will just use the earpiece as a second speaker, this has a dedicated speaker on the top as well. Very good sound, even a bit of bass. Really fantastic sound, excellent audio quality. There's so much in this that frankly, and I did try at the store I bought it from, there's a 14-day period where you can return your purchase for any reason and get your money back. So for the entirety of 2 weeks, while on the one hand being absolutely enamored by this phone, I was always looking at alternatives, thinking about returning it, getting my money back to buy something that's better. There is really nothing out there that's better than this for $500, period. This has been all. I have been Radu. This has been a smartphone review. This has been the Motorola Edge 50 Ultra. And while not your usual kind of smartphone review, it's what matters to me. A smartphone review from the point of view of a photographer. It's the smartphone review of a tech enthusiast, of the 10-year-old that wanted a phaser and grew up to be the 42-year-old that likes smartphones and gadgets. I have been Radu. This has been 1,000 words. Until next time, farewell.